The 2023 elections are just a few months away. Campaigns are on hold for the general elections until sometime later in the year. But of course, there's a lot of crisscrossing here and there. We're talking about, parties naming their vice presidential candidates or placeholders, like we have learned in the last week with regards to certain political parties. But I think what caught a lot of people's attention in the past week, of course, is the elections in Ekiti State, which is seen as sort of a litmus test for what's to come, because it's the first major election since the Electoral Act has become law. People are trying to understand what happens with, how the PVCs are going to work, how electronic voting might work, how the system is going to shape up, basically. And it looks like things have gone on considerably okay for the most part, because the results came in before the day started today, which is quite unusual in some cases. And we have the APC candidates declare the winner. But we're going to be joined now by Dr. Mutiat Oladejo, who's joining us online to help us, sort of unpack all of what to be looking forward to. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you.
All right. So, first of all, what are your thoughts on the Ekiti election? How would you rate the INEC? There's a lot that was seen online. We saw several allegations. I mean, there are still allegations, so we don't want to go too in-depth into them. But for the most part, it looks like things have gone on well, even though the turnout is still abysmal. We have less than 40% voter turnout. What are your thoughts so far?
Yeah, thank you very much. That's usually the trend, because not everybody that registered for the voters card eventually votes. So it's not new. And that means that we still have political apathy, and people still have some reservations for participating in voting for elections and for electing those who are going to represent them. But more importantly, the election itself was, to a certain extent, we haven't had so much issues like we used to have in the past about the chaos and all the things. So we could say that as it is presently, there are the election results show that we have a free and fair election, and then towards 2023. It gives us an idea of how smoothly Nigeria can be going forward in running elections. But as per the performances of the political parties, the way it is presently, we can see that APC still stop the performance, and we have other parties coming after. But what is more surprising is how SDP was able to pull through. We would have expected that PDP should have more votes, and there should be a kind of a second political party that has the highest followers in the Southwest. But from what we can see in Ekiti, we can see that new parties are beginning to gain grounds. They are beginning to become popular. And so that should give us an idea that Nigeria is actually a multi-party state. And towards 2023, we can't be too fixated on thinking that the parties that are the most popular will take all the victory at elections. We shouldn't think that way, because Nigeria is a very big country, and so we should expect that there are different factors. We shouldn't be too fixated on what we used to know, that, okay, APC is very popular, PDP, and we should not be thinking that the contest is basically between APC and PDP alone. There are other parties that are also there. And when it comes to democracy and voter education, we begin to see new patterns that are beginning to come in, that it's not really about vote buying alone. People are beginning to understand governance, evaluate governance, and then be able to determine actually what they want, even though there is still apathy.
Okay. I'll get back to you, but we're joined online as well by Okweyemi. Okay. Okweyemi, I want to get your perspective, because she pointed something out earlier, but I just want to get your thoughts on it. We have almost 70% of voters didn't turn out. We've always said that apathy is a problem. But, places like Anambra, we had about 10% voter turnout. There was all the excuses about security or the lack of it as a situation. With Ekiti State, we're back to what seems to be the norm. Who who's the onuson, you think, to get voters excited? Is it the parties? Is it INEC? Or is this a sign that people are sort of not having a lot of faith in the system, or the candidates are not exciting enough? What do you think is happening?
Thank you, Ebuka. Thank you for having me. Actually, I was actually surprised by the turnout of voters in Ekiti State on Saturday. With over 700,000 people with PVC, we have total voters of 367,000 people. And that bothers me, right? It's a litmus test to what we expect in 2023. That's why we tell people politics is not elitist. The idea of politics is local, right? And it's beyond coming on Twitter to rant. We need to be able to mobilize. So it is the responsibility of the political parties to actually mobilize. It is, but if you have to look at the partisan voters, they are quite, considering the number, there are fewer compared to non-partisan voters. So we have the civil society organizations. Maybe it's not INEC's job. I still wonder where the National Orientation Agency is. I don't know if they still exist. And it just shows that the apathy is still there. And the apathy is is largely and is predominant amongst elites. And I hope that going into 2023 or going into Australian election in July 16, we can have more civil society organizations. We can have more civil society organizations, religious organizations, because I expect that, like we have the Otoge in Kwara State back last year or 2 years ago. I think about 2 years ago that we had Otoge campaign. I hope that these trade organizations, trade unions, religious organizations, and several other civil society organizations can start looking into how they can collaborate to solving this apathy problem. That's what I think, Ebuka.
All right, I'll still stick with you before I go back to Dr. Mutiat. Because she mentioned something about, the fact that the SDP came second, sort of threw off the balance of the APC and the PDP, which you usually find in our elections, and that might be showing signs of, what could happen in the long run, or the fact that Nigeria is actually a multi-party state and not just a two-party state. Do you think this is a one-off? I mean, considering the fact that the candidate of the SDP in these elections was a governor before, so there might have been that factor. But do you see this playing out on a larger scale as we head up to 2023, or is it just a one-off and, we're still a two-party state, you think?
Thank you, Buka. The level of relevance that SDP had, in the last election in Ekiti State as a result of the intra-party problem that PDP had, and of course, Shegun is quite popular, in Ekiti State, he's been the governor before, like you rightly mentioned, and of course, during his time, he had a certain level of, influence and impact on the people, and I think the intra-party crisis in PDP actually, led to to a lot of the campaign from PDP to SDP, and that's what gives the vote. I really don't think that is going to happen in 2023. I try to be optimistic a lot of times, but when you look at the party structure, when you look at structure, generally, you realize that APC is a strong party. That's the largest party in West Africa, if I'm correct. And PDP is also a very strong structure. But I don't foresee, with what is going on right now, of course, I hope for a better turnout in 2023 elections. We people are tuning out to get their PVC shows that we're going to have, better turnout in the 2023 elections. However, elites, are we able to queue 3, 4, 5 hours to actually cast our ballots? If you consider all of that, yesterday I was speaking to a friend of mine who I know to be a very a loud person on Twitter. He lives in Ekiti State, and I asked him, I was trying to get updates from him on how election is going, and I'm surprised to find out that my friend was at home watching Netflix, watching movies. And I asked him, what happened to the noise you're making online? So it's not enough for us to make noise online to mobilize for a third force party. It is much more important that we also mobilize to go up.
Okay, thank you very much, Akwemi. Let me come back to you now, Dr. Musiat. I want to talk about this thing that has been bugging me all week. You know, a lot of us were introduced to this term placeholder out of nowhere. You know, suddenly we wondered then, why is there a deadline for the submission of running mates for these candidates if they can just put any name in there and still swap it out later? Why does the deadline exist, and why does this loophole exist? And what do you think about this placeholder situation we're seeing all over the place now with, you know, parties naming anybody and saying they're just using that one to hold the place until they're ready to name their candidates? What do you think about that?
Yeah, thank you. Nigeria as a state is complicated. Take that. It's extremely complicated. So I understand what the candidates are going through in making decisions as to exactly who to pick, because you realize that some parties, for example, let me be specific here. I know that Labour Party is just trying to gain some ground, and they don't have that kind of ground in the north. And so it will be quite difficult for them to just come up with any name. They need to make a lot of consultations. They need to consider a lot of factors. And you know, when it comes to winning elections, number matters. So what will bring those numbers are the things that are bugging the candidates presently now. And so, you know, INEC has its rules, no doubt. But at the same time, the parties are trying to be careful. And same for APC too. I think the problem I can see with APC, it's too much. There are too much factors to consider in who becomes the running mate: religion, zone within the north, religion, and I think competence, which is the most important thing anyway. Competence is the most important thing, apart from numbers that matter for the party. Competence is also important. And so I think these are the things that brings up the idea of a placeholder. Okay, you can submit a name just to meet the deadline, then keep working and keep thinking about the right candidate that is going to help you in winning the election. So I'm even fascinated too, because it's not something that we are used to before. And the fact that we are having that new word in our political lexicon goes a long way to show that we are actually growing when it comes to democracy in Nigeria. Nigeria as a state, I would want to say that we are growing, we are learning. And so I see everything as a process, because Nigeria is a multi-ethnic and multi-religious society. And so when we want to take decisions, it's not something anyone can just jump into. And so the idea of placeholder too is something that we can begin to continue to interrogate. That how do we navigate it towards maybe 2027 or 2031?
Yeah, sorry to cut you there, because that's what I want to find out. What does that say? I mean, we literally just passed an amendment to an electoral act. How do we still have these loopholes? And it makes you wonder how many more loopholes are there that parties are going to be able to exploit as we get to 2023.
Yeah, well, for me, when loopholes is not a big deal, it's not a big deal. There will always be loopholes. Even in policies, there will always be loopholes for us to rejig and more like amend bills and all that. So it's not really a big deal if we understand the complexity of how Nigeria is, that we are having a placeholder. And it also goes a long way to say that we need to actually, how do I put this? We need to actually understand how to bring in the youth to understand the things that are going on. Like the last speaker said, he made a reference that is very germane, that he is surprised that his friend is sitting at home watching Netflix. That's a big deal, because if the youth are at home watching Netflix, then how do we really come up with solutions that will bring about changes in the society? How do we challenge the old age syndrome that we are encountering presently now? Because there's no doubt about the fact that people from 55 and above are most of the candidates that we want to vote for in 2023. And so what about people from 45 below? What are we really doing? Is it about sitting at home to watch Netflix, or staying somewhere in Lagos and be interested in what is happening in Ekiti when you're actually from Ekiti State? And so, I mean, these are the things we need to interrogate. We can't just continue to say, oh, placeholder, why should it be or why should it not be? The thing is, how are we going to take over from these 70-year-old men? really,
All right.
without sentiments anyway. And so that's the way I see it. But the fact that we have the idea of placeholder, it's not new. Nigeria is a big state, and so things will keep evolving, and we keep revolving around issues.
All right. Akpayemi, let me come back quickly to you now, because she's brought up something and I want to talk about, you know, and you have also mentioned a lot about the elites, the elites, the elites. And I want to talk about Ekiti. They had a live debate, which was broadcast, of course, by Channels Television. We know that it was quite talked about on social media. And then a few days later, we had the elections. Do you see that these things are important? Because there's always the conversation of, do debates even matter in a place like this, where on the day we start seeing allegations flying about, you know, 500 naira or 10,000 naira or whatever it is being shared on the line, and nobody cares about what was said in the debates? Do you think debates, or that debate had an effect, you think, on what happened on the day in Ekiti State? Or do you think, you know, those things don't matter?
Yes, the debates might be very important when we consider the elite, you know. But my concern is that the elites don't vote. The elites don't vote. That's something I've actually come to realize in Nigeria State. So it's not about whether the elite. So it's not a. I wrote something during the APC primaries that the brightest of ideas and the sharpest and the clearest of visions don't win election in Nigeria. It's sad, but that's where we are, you know. And I hope that gradually, as a people, we can begin to, you know, this clamoring for change is a gradual process. I said last time I was in the studio that if we are talking about 2023, we already missed the bus, because this mindset re-engineering, this change that we are clamoring for, you know, it can only be delivered by the numbers. And if we are looking at the numbers, it's not the elites we are looking at. Politics is not elitist. Politics is local. And for us to actually achieve the result that we want, we need to be able to target the grassroots, mobilize to them, speak to them in the languages they can understand, and sell manifesto to them. I hope that in the coming elections, maybe Osun State is happening in July 16, can we begin to have, maybe if we can have this debate in local dialects, in Yoruba languages, and how many of these voters actually have access to televisions at home? You know, they are the ones that will deliver the number, that will determine who wins or who does not win. You know, elites don't vote. And I hope that, you know, we can start looking at, religious organizations, society organizations, to start, you know, seeing how we can correct this apathy that elites have towards voting. So debate might be important for the elite community. I will not dispute that, you know. But if we actually want to say that we want that change that we desire, it is critical that we start looking at taking debate in local dialects, local languages that people can understand, and of course taking it across on platforms that are widely used in those states. You know, how many people watch television compared to the number of people that use that use the radio? How many people can understand English compared to the number of people that speak Yoruba? So can we begin to debate in local dialect? And if debate 1 week to election changes absolutely nothing. You know, the moment the candidates come out, it is important that we begin to start to engage them, you know, and of course, their ideologies can begin to start spreading across the grassroots level. But I keep saying it, that debate is for the elites, and politics is not elitist, it is local. I'd say that.
Thank you very much, Akpayemi Oki, and thank you very much, Dr. Mutiat Oladejo, for joining us. We have a long way to go, but not so long when you think about it, because February is also just around the corner, and we'll hopefully have you back to talk more on, you know, things that will build up to the general elections in February 2023. Thanks a lot for joining us.